Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at some more information that's been leaked to me via a source that at least I think is fairly reliable. I will not be revealing the name of my source in the video, although if they feel they want to comment and say who they are in the comments, they can feel free to do that. But anyway, as with all leaks and rumours, I will say take it with a grain of salt. Despite me thinking it's a fairly reliable source, for all we know it could be a lie, it could be faked. So, and we won't of course actually know until the vehicles are properly released into the game. Anyway though, so what this is about is British top tier tanks. Now as we know, currently the Challenger 1 Mark II is the top tank of the British Ground Forces, and it's a 9.7, so first off, Britain does not have a top tier MBT. And second off, this thing facing T-80s and Leopard 2A4s, it doesn't have a huge amount of chance to actually shine and show its strengths. Now, one thing that many people want to see is a proper top tier British tank, and looks like we'll be getting that soon. As you can see in the background, we've got this conversation from Discord between me and my source. First off, they say Chally 2 might be coming soon. Now, that's definitely a good sign. Challenger 2 saying, I have personally said I want to see in game quite a lot. And then they say also possible Vickers MBT for 10.0, one of the Vickers. And I say any date estimation, and apparently for the Vickers MBT, it's likely to be 1.87 or 1.89. So the first two updates of next year, most likely. And I said most likely the MBT Mark 7, which is the version on the Leo 2 chassis, which we're going to talk about a bit more in a minute. And they basically said yes. So basically in the next few updates, Britain will be getting a 10.0 MBT in the form of the Vickers MBT Mark 7. Most likely the Mark 7 II, which is the variant that I have the information on. And then the Chally 2 will most likely be coming after. They did go on to say that the Challenger 2 would likely be a 10.7 or 11.0 rating, as Gaijin next year is apparently planning to push tanks up to 11.0 with inclusions of stuff like the M1A1, obviously, which we saw on a previous leak list, and T80U, all those sort of things, pushing the BR up to 11.0, and that will then include the Challenger 2. Anyway, looking at the MBT Mark 7, the 2 variant, first off, this tank was actually developed to replace the Challenger 1, so it seems fitting it would come after that in the tech tree. But what I would personally prefer to see is this coming in Tier 6 after the Conqueror and the original Vickers MBT, just to give that line a proper finish there, because currently that's a rather skint line, and the Challenger line comes after multiple chieftains, so it would take a very long time to get to this vehicle. So I think placing the Vickers MBT Mark 7 after the Conqueror, which is also down the line of the original Vickers MBT, would be a very good choice. Now, in terms of performance, I did originally say that this had the chassis of the Leopard 2, basically the same chassis as the Leopard 2A4. Of course, there are minor changes. There's very small upgrades and changes there. But in terms of stats, this has got a 4-man crew. You've got the commander, the gunner, the loader, and the driver. What will be expected from any tank? Having a 4-man crew, at least in my opinion, does help with MBT's increasing survivability. In War Thunder, at least, you can lose 2 crew members and still be able to perform fairly well with your vehicle, which is definitely a very big positive, I think. In terms of gun, it's got a 120mm rifled cannon. And in terms of the options, there are actually 3 options for the gun. First off, you have the L11 120mm rifled gun, which is a British gun. It was also used on the Challenger 1. It was the gun developed for the Challenger 1 that was then used on that. Although for export customers of the MBT Mark 7, it was offered with 2 other guns. That being the Rheinmetall 120mm smoothbore gun, which we have already seen on the Leopard 2 series, the 2K and the 2A4, as well as the French Giat 120mm cannon. So, and that's also a smoothbore. So, all 120s, you've got a French gun, a German gun, and a British gun. Likely, if it's on the British tech tree, you'll have the British gun, which will have, obviously, the same, most likely the same rounds as the Challenger 1, which aren't actually the best rounds, so I would hope they would somehow give it better rounds that it could use to destroy enemy tanks. Now, in terms of secondary armament, it has 2 machine guns, one of which is mounted coaxially next to the gun, and the other of which is on the turret roof near the commander's hatch. In terms of engine, it uses the same engine as the Leopard 2A4, the MTU K105 diesel engine, which produces 1,500 horsepower. This thing has a road speed of 72 kilometers per hour, so unlike the Challenger 1, it definitely will not be lacking in terms of road or off-road, for that case, driving performance. Range doesn't really matter, but it is worth mentioning this tank had a 550 kilometer range in terms of how long it could keep going for, which definitely isn't something to sort of look down on. Now, I couldn't find any info on the gun elevation range, but in terms of the turret, it is worth mentioning that this uses a Vickers Universal Turret, originally designed for the Vickers Mark IV Valiant MBT, which had a different hull, but this hull was upgraded to give better protection and mobility. But this turret is slightly beefed up from the Mark IV Valiant variant, with more Chobham armor. So this uses Chobham armor, same armor to that on the Challenger 1, but then slightly improved from the Challenger 1's armor. It might also be worth mentioning that this very similar turret design was also, with a few improvements of course, was used later on in the Brazilian Osturo MBT. So this turret design was actually used in combat effectively. So you do actually have the Leopard 2 chassis, which was obviously used in service, and the turret, which was later on, with a few mods, used in service by a Brazilian tank. So this tank is sort of 2 parts of tanks that were used in service mashed together, despite of course the turret being used later. So I think we've looked over most of the things. How do I feel this would work? I think in-game, a 10.0 rating would fit this very nicely. It is a very mobile tank. It can go pretty quickly, a lot faster than the Challenger, as well as having a fairly decent gun, which hopefully Gaijin will give it improved rounds to actually make it better performing, as well as also maybe giving it a few other things to just generally improve it over the Challenger 1. It does have smoke grenades, as you can see on the pictures. You can see the optics quite easily. I would possibly say that Gaijin might consider giving it the German Rheinmetall cannon just to give it the better rounds, as I think the L11 cannon for the Challenger 1 didn't actually have any far improved rounds developed for that. Although, I don't know, we will have to wait and see if this is actually added in update either 1.87 or 1.89, when my source seems to think they will be added. Well, next up we have the second tank we're going to be looking at, this being the Challenger 2. Now, this is a vehicle I personally have been wanting to see in game for quite a long while, and we're just going to take a brief look at the stats really, as it's likely this won't be added for a fair amount of time after the MBT Mark 7, because obviously I've been told that will be added in the next few updates, but there's no actual definite period of when the Chally 2 will be added. Now, looking at the gun, it again is a 120mm rifled cannon, only it's not an L11, this is an L30E4, which was improved from the L11 most likely for the Challenger 2. Now, one good thing to note is that this is actually capable of firing a wide variety of standard NATO munitions, which will obviously be improved from the ones on the Challenger 1 by quite a big margin. And it is a very good looking vehicle. In terms of secondary armament, we have got 2 machine guns, one of which is coaxially, one of which is on top of the roof, the same as with all the other British MBTs. Again, it's a 4-man crew. You've got the commander, the gunner, the loader, and the driver. In terms of power, though, compared to the Vickers MBT Mark 7, this is a Perkins diesel engine, but this only produces 1,200 horsepower compared to the MBT's 1,500 from that Leo 2 chassis. So this can only go 56 kilometers per hour. The thing is, the MBT has more power and it's lighter, so it can go an awful lot faster. But as with the Challenger series, they tend to be a bit more on the slow side, but still a fairly decent protection. This has got composite armor, of course, which is the second generation composite armor. The Chally 1 is the first gen, this is the second gen, so it's clearly got a pretty big improvement there. An improvement at least which should really buff up the crew survivability and protection levels of this tank. But anyway though, talking about the ratings, I've been told this is going to either be 10.7 or 11.0, and you know what? I think it will probably fit those ratings fairly well, at least when you place it up alongside stuff like the T-ATU and the M1A1. Those vehicles, of course, are faster, but this still does have very good protection, despite there being, of course, a few IRL scenarios that have happened that prove the protection isn't quite as good as it is said to be. But I think this tank would fit fairly well, and especially since it has the NATO standard rounds in the gun, the amount of actual pen on those rounds and the amount of effectiveness is definitely going to be pushed up very much. But despite the slow speed of this vehicle, it is very well known that the off-road capabilities are actually quite good. So I think this vehicle is definitely going to be something very much anticipated that, at least for me personally, I am very much looking forward to seeing in game. Anyway though, it is now the end of the video, so if you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribe to the channel. If you do, that would be very much appreciated. Do feel free to comment below and let me know what you think of these two vehicles, or really anything War Thunder related. There are links in the description for my Patreon, live.War Thunder profile, as well as a invite link to my Discord server, so feel free to give them a look. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.